My brother cleared out my savings account in order to pay back his gambling debts, and my parents somehow convinced me to forgive him. He did something even worse, so I exposed him in front of everyone at Thanksgiving dinner. A few years ago, my brother asked for my credit card so he could order himself takeout as his card was locked. Instead of takeout, he used my card to access my savings account and cleared out every dime to pay back his gambling debt. These savings were meant to be used on a house, but now they were gone. When I found out what he did, I went insane. I locked myself in my apartment and started drinking, then sent a text to my brother telling him I hate him and he can rot in hell. The very next morning, my parents showed up. They said what he did was forgivable because family is more important than money. I stared in disbelief, then yelled, "Of course they say that. He's their precious golden boy who could do no wrong." My mother started crying crocodile tears, but when she saw I wasn't budging, she began screaming. At that moment, I kicked them out, telling them that just like my brother, they could go to hell. My brother had taken over $75,000 from me, and now I had to renew my lease in an apartment for another year when I should have been using that money on a down payment. It had taken me years to build my bank account to that amount, and it was gone in an instant. My parents complaining that they hadn't seen me in a while. I would remind them why I wasn't going to visit them, which was my brother Jim, and they would bring up how I would regret it when I'm old and gray, and they said I need to cherish the time we have with each other because it was limited. I agreed and told them that they always had the option to come visit me. Truthfully, I didn't want them to, but I knew the game they were trying to play and I wasn't having it. My mom told me that Jim said he missed me and that he would always love the little Sarah, who he had to clean up after she got spaghetti in her hair. When I was a toddler, my mom gave me spaghetti while I was sitting in my high chair. I hated spaghetti since I was young, and that day was the day she found out. After I tasted it, I began throwing it, kicking and screaming. The kitchen was a mess by the time I got done with it. I pulled my hair with my tomato-stained fingers. I was too young to remember, but Mom would always tell me this story, and it was always funny to me. That was when Jim came to the rescue. He took me out of the high chair and held me. He cleaned me up and helped Mom clean the kitchen. He was roughly 12 at this point. Hearing my mom tell me that story again made me cherish our family a little bit more. In a moment of utter weakness, I decided that I would give Jim another chance, but with more boundaries set this time. Forgiving him took time. As the days turned into weeks, it still pained me to think about him or see his face, because I was reminded of the progress that I had made for my first house was out of the window. I tried my best to be cordial with him, and my parents seemed to like the improvements in our relationship. They invited me more often for family dinners, game nights, and movie nights in an attempt to get our relationship back to what it was before, but the thought still stung. After a few months of rebuilding my trust in Jim again, I felt like I could laugh a little more and be myself again around him. I didn't have to guard my purse as much anymore, and soon we would hang out by ourselves and go on brother-sister outings. One of our favorite things to do together was ziplining. There was this ziplining place near my parents' house where we would go a lot as teenagers. The zip line started from the top of a cliff, sort of in the woods, and would drop you off into the lake. It was so high up, and I never got used to the drop, but it was fun going there with Jim again. When we returned home from our little adventure, we went to a fast food place back in the city because we were starving. As we pulled into the drive-thru to pay, I noticed that my main credit card was missing. This was my everyday credit card. I wondered if it could have fallen out of my pocket at the ziplining place. Jim asked me if everything was okay, and I told him that my credit card was missing. He said it was no worries and offered to pay for our food with his. We got our food and headed home. I had to drop Jim off back at our parents' house because he lost his car in a bed about a year ago. When I got home, I checked my wallet again and found my credit card, except it was in a different pocket in my wallet than the pocket that I usually put it in. I figured I was just tired, and that was the reason I hadn't noticed it before, so I went to bed. The next night, I got a text message from my credit card company asking for authorization for a casino near my parents' house, the same casino that Jim spent his entire check on every other Friday. My heart dropped. I couldn't believe that Jim had pulled the same stunt again. I immediately declined the transaction and checked my other accounts. He must have taken pictures of my credit cards and put them back in my wallet when we hung out the other day. My other credit card apps showed that I had hit my limit for the month, and I knew that wasn't the case. I tried to call and dispute the payments, but the merchants showed proof of my brother being the one making the purchases. They declined my request to dispute the charges, and now I am left responsible for the debt. I called my brother, and he didn't respond. The phone clicked in the middle of the tone like he'd declined the call. My blood was boiling. I called my parents, and my mom answered. I told her the situation and how Jim racked up $7,000 worth of debt across all of my credit cards that night. She told me that she would call him and would call me back after she spoke with him. I told her no need and that I was coming over that instant. It was almost 11 o'clock at night as I headed to my parents' house and waited in the living room for Jim to return home. As he walked through the door, he flickered the light on, and I scared the daylights out of him when he saw me sitting in the living room chair. I asked him where was my money, and he looked puzzled. I told him that I already knew about him stealing my credit card information and threatened to call the police if he didn't tell me where the money was. He broke down and confessed, saying that he felt bad about me not being able to get into my first house this year because of him, and that he wanted to make up for it. So he used my money to play at the casino because he wanted to win the money back for me. It went without saying that he didn't win any of the money back, and he lost everything. I told him that if he felt so bad about stealing my money in the first place, why would he do it again? That's when my parents came downstairs. My mom tried to de-escalate, but I was past that point. He had taken my house down payment from me and left me in a ton of credit card debt. The chances of me getting a house within the next few years were getting slimmer and slimmer. My parents had nothing to say about his actions. He apologized profusely, but there was no coming back from this. I cut him off for good this time. I told them never to contact me again and that I was done. In the next few weeks, my updated credit report came back, and my credit score went down over 100 points. The loan I applied for was no longer available to me, and I was forced to get a second job on top of my current 9-to-5. I had a goal in mind, and I was determined to get my house and live the life that I wanted. In the following weeks, my phone rang off the hook. I had calls from my parents and Jim. I ignored them both. If it weren't for them, I wouldn't have had to work these long hours to pay off this debt. The worst part was Jim didn't even offer to help pay it off. He felt that since his stealing my money to make me more money was coming from a nice place in his heart, he didn't have to pay it off. I could never trust him again. I tried time and time again, and just as I thought we were making progress, he goes and steals my money again. I continued working off the debt, and with the second job, it was making it easier to pay off the debt, but harder to keep going. I would come home exhausted from my second job, get 4 hours of sleep, and wake up to get ready for my first job at 6 a.m. This repeated cycle declined my mental health, and just as I got to a semi-comfortable spot in saving money, I quit my second job and cut back on my expenses as best I could. It was October and the decorations were out on people's lawns, and my parents called me for the 4th time that week. I picked up on the 4th call and they were relieved to hear my voice. They told me how much they missed seeing me and talked about when I was a kid, Halloween was my favorite holiday. We would cut pumpkins as a family and watch Disney specials. Dad would put up the decorations in the yard, and we'd enjoy ghost-shaped cookies with our hot cocoa. She told me she really wanted to see me since it had been so long, and I told her that the only way I'd see her was if they came over. She agreed. The following week, my mom and dad came over, and we talked to one another without addressing the elephant in the room. After a while, my mom told me that she would love for me to come to Thanksgiving with them since they were hosting it at their house this year. I told her that I didn't want to. She promised that there would be no drama, and that it would just be a family gathering like it always was. I thought about it and wondered if I could see Jim again without wanting to punch his face in. I refused. That was when my dad chimed in and said that he would love for me to come and practically begged me to forgive Jim. My dad never asked for anything more than once, and I knew this was really serious for him. Against my better judgment, I agreed that I would forgive Jim and attend Thanksgiving at their house this year. They jumped up and kissed and hugged me. They assured me that he would never do anything like that again and that I was safe from any of his shenanigans. I wouldn't let Jim off the hook so easily, but I would attend Thanksgiving dinner with the family since it made Mom and Dad happy. In the weeks that led to Thanksgiving, I felt alone in my family. I saw them on social media going out to eat and posting about their game nights, and felt like I should have been there, but the sting from the past had broken my trust in them. I was still dealing with financial issues and battling with having to choose which bills would get paid that month. My credit was still shot, and I was slowly trying to rebuild the pieces of me that I didn't break. As it got closer to the dinner, I considered changing my mind because I didn't think it would be great for my mental health, so I called my mom. When she got on the phone, she said that she was getting the decorations together and doing some last-minute shopping. She expressed how excited she was that I was going, and told me that she told the entire family that I would be attending. My plan to back out of Thanksgiving dinner was out the window. When Thanksgiving came, I felt very uneasy as I drove to my parents' house. I had no appetite and feared that anything that did go in would immediately come back out. When I got inside, I saw my family sitting at the dinner table, laughing and smiling with each other. My brother acknowledged me as if nothing happened. He ended up enjoying the entire evening like all had been forgiven. He even tried to make cheeky jokes with me. It ticked me off to see him having a good time, knowing that when I left there that I would have to go straight to sleep to prepare for my job the next day, and he was the reason that I couldn't buy the house that I wanted. At the end of the dinner, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up. My heart was pounding. I look straight at my brother and start laying it all out aloud for the entire family to hear. I told him how he's destroyed me financially, how I've been forced to work multiple jobs just to keep my head above water. I tell him that I didn't trust him anymore, that he'd crossed too many lines, and I'm done pretending everything's okay. Then I turned to my parents, and I was like, "You've been enabling him for years, choosing this fake version of family unity over my actual well-being. How is that fair?" The whole room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. My brother tries to laugh it off, saying it was all in the past. but I cut him off. I told him I was done forgiving him, and he was no longer welcome in my life. I stormed out, thinking I was going to be dealing with the fallout all alone. But over the next few days, my other family members start reaching out to me. They apologized for not having my back sooner, saying they had no idea how bad it was. Some even offered to help me financially, trying to make up for what he did. It was more than what Jim did. I thought I would have been on my own, but turns out not everyone's willing to turn a blind eye to his crap.